Welcome everyone to the 2021 R workflow workshops for NIMS scientists. If you're not from NIMS, that's fine. You're welcome to join. And give you a brief introduction to myself. I am a research scientist in the Mathematical Biology Division at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center in Seattle. And I am heavily involved with developing tools for analyzing fisheries data. I develop and maintain a number of R packages, many R packages for that purpose. In addition, I'm involved in teams at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center that, things like, most recently things like, status reviews where we're combining data and analyses and text, and we need tools that allow us to work more efficiently in tracking what we're doing, be more transparent, be more reproducible. And these sessions that I'll be teaching, and let me go, actually I'm going to go back here, give you a little overview of what I'll be doing. So the objective with these sessions is basically to get you started with some key tools that are going to help you work faster, work more efficiently. Early on, a number of years ago, I was really heavily involved in R programming, but I wanted to get better with my workflow. And so I would ask people, like, what are the key things that you use in your work that you would recommend to somebody else? And then I would go about trying to learn those things that they said, like, yeah, definitely work on this. And so I remember that, and then so these sessions I'll be teaching are sort of my version of those key things that I think are going to really help you work faster. And the first two sessions I'm going to be teaching you about using a Git and GitHub for version control. So this is something where you're tracking what you're doing with your code. And this is a good example of kind of what I'm trying to do with these sessions. Before I was using this, all my friends who are programmers told me, yeah, you gotta use a version control like Git, and they were using Git. And I would try to use it, and it was too hard. And I have been programming all my life. There's no reason why it was too hard, but for some reason, it was just hard for me to remember, how to do it. I'm trying to do it on the command line. It's way too hard. I keep destroying my work. And then, I don't know how many times I've tried, quite a few times. And finally, I was like, okay, fine. And I asked a friend of mine, I said, hey, can I sit next to you for 15 minutes and watch you work, how you interact with Git and GitHub? And I don't want you to teach me, I just want to watch you and how you work. And I couldn't believe it. In 15 minutes, just watching my colleague work, I was like, oh my God, I was doing it all wrong. It's so simple. And all I had to do was watch somebody more experienced, how they interacted. So that's the goal here. You're going to watch me work, although I'm doing it more in a teaching capacity, but I'm going to kind of show you the workflow so you can see how to do it and how to not get yourself into trouble. And when I teach things in these sessions, there are many ways to do things in R, there are many ways to do things in GitHub, and I am going to be teaching things the way that I think it's going to be like the smoothest entry for you, just from my experience of working with a lot of different scientists and helping them. In particular, today, I'm going to be teaching you to interact with GitHub using GitHub Desktop. Last year when I taught this session, I thought, you know what, I can do this through RStudio, which I can. I do that myself often. But there's a lot of authentication hassles. And I ended up trying to help a lot of people work through those. And it's just a hassle. And those kind of hassles interfere with your learning. So instead, I'm going to use GitHub Desktop, which actually is what I use normally. And it's a much smoother entry to this, a lot fewer headaches. Okay. So a little bit before I hop in about kind of logistics and questions. So first off, we're going to use the chat during the 10 to 11 period for questions, and anyone can answer questions on there. I'll try to follow it, but obviously I'm talking. It's going to be a little harder for me to follow. But if you know the answer, just jump in and answer. Totally fine. Then at the end, what I'm going to do is I'll open it up and we can unmute ourselves and ask questions, or I'll kind of go through the chat and answer things. Okay, so that's the logistics there. And then I am going to be using this, our workflow workshop organization for us to chat together. You're welcome to use it. You don't have to. This is going to be for after the sessions if you have questions. Yes, I'll be using GitHub Desktop instead of Git within RStudio. I will post the link to my 2020 material if you want to use Git with RStudio, or you can ask me at the end of the 11 a.m. Session. And I can show you how to do it. Okay, so I'm going to be using this GitHub or Workflow Workshop 2021 to do discussions. I'm kind of trying this out as a way to interact with teams. You're welcome to use it if you want. It's not going to be sort of critical, but maybe you would like to learn this too. And also, if you join this, then I'll be able to message you with GitHub. One thing I should say about GitHub is it is really excessive in its notifications. I encourage you to go into settings and turn off email notifications in case you're swamped. But once you join this with your GitHub account, you can just go here and then ask to be added to it. Then we can use this Teams feature. This is fairly new. And we can go down here into our workflow 2021 and kind of chat about things if you want to try that. Okay. So right here we go. Okay. So with that, I am going to launch in to the material for today. I'm going to start off with a really super brief introduction to RStudio, which is the common thing that is used for your interface to R. And if you don't use it already, do use it. It is going to make your life a lot easier. So, RStudio, you can install that. It's free. You can have IT install that on your computer. If you don't have it installed, you can go ahead and click on RStudio Cloud and follow along. I'll show you that in a moment. You can log into RStudio with a Google account, I think. So you don't have to make a special account for that. So I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to show you first RStudio on my desktop. And when you open it up the first time, what you're going to see is these 4 panels. If you don't see all of those, you can go into View and futz with that. The panel up here, the default, is going to be files that you open. So this one is just some script here. Let me just save this. Okay. So, sorry, I'm not going to save that. So you have a script up here, and then you have your console down here, where I can just type code. Then you can see a variety of things over here, and you have a variety of tabs to do different things. Environment are things that's sort of variables that you have saved. For example, history is, you know, whatever code you've typed. So if you need to repeat code, you can easily find that here. Later on, you're going to see a Git tab here, and I'll show you how that works. And then in later sessions, when I talk about R packages, you're going to have a tab there for how to build your R package. Then down below here, you have your various tabs for like files, plots, the R packages that you're using, and here you can install them easily and update them. So really nice platform for interacting with, with R. Back here. Okay. So now, one key thing when you're working with RStudio, organizing your code, you're going to want to have projects. So you're not going to have like all your code all lumped together. You're going to have, you organize things into projects. And this is going to be critical when we start interacting with GitHub, that we're working within a project. So that's really easy to open a project in RStudio. You go up to this corner up here, and you just say new project. Say, let's just do a new one. Okay. So, and then it gives you a few options here. I'm just going to start a new directory here. Often what you'll be doing is maybe you have some work you've already started, so you're going to start a project in an existing directory. And all it does is it puts some special files there that RStudio can identify when you go back and you open that up. We're also going to see later today about how you can use version control and pull in your projects that you have up on GitHub. But here, I can just create a new project. I need to tell it where to put it. Just put it on my desktop for a moment. So that's it of how you create a project. And now I can put like all my code here, and now I have this thing that I could sync up to GitHub later. Okay, so I want to show you an example of what a project, a bigger project looks like, kind of in real life. So this is a paper, and in this one, yeah, you just kind of have all your stuff there. It's pretty obvious. And then now you see we have this Git tab here, which is what is showing tracking all the changes that I've made over time. And I'm going to show you that when we get to the Git section. Okay. Anything else? Okay, no, I think that's it. What I do want to show you, though, very quickly is if you're following along on with the GitHub Cloud, right here, show you what that looks like. There's the GitHub Cloud. There we go. So this is GitHub Cloud. And for those of you who already program in R and you need to collaborate with people, I would definitely check out GitHub Cloud, because what that allows you to do is you can set up a workspace for someone. They don't have to install anything. You can put in all the packages that you want. And you can also have like your, if it involves C++ code, it involves like, Stan or JAX, you can set that all up for them. They don't have to install anything, and they can just click on this workspace that you've created for them and work in a copy of that workspace on the cloud. I use that for teaching in situations like this where I want people to be able to follow along and see RStudio without having to install anything. It's a little slow. You can see it's taking a little time to come up, but the platform that the user has is exactly the same as RStudio Desktop. The one difference is when we make projects, you go over here to your workspace and you click that. And then you have pretty intuitive drop-downs to make your projects here. And it's free for kind of limited use. If you use it a lot, you will want to pay like $5 a month. Okay, so let's go back to sort of my week one here, and I just want to show you a couple key things for interacting with RStudio. Let's get a script going here. So I just clicked over here and can create, scripts, markdown. This makes it so fast. It has all these templates for doing these things, so that really speeds things up for you. And then when I want to run some code, I'm going to pull up the little help file. You're going to see it over here in a moment. So I'm just going to grab some code. This is for linear regression. So this is another nice feature. It makes your help information right there. Copy that. So I did Control-C to copy that. Control-V, put it over here. So now I have it up here. I could save this, and then when I want to run things, I can just mark them and click this run on that. So that's kind of how we're interacting here. Source it, run it all. There's mine. Okay, great. So I just want to point out a few super helpful features about this, and then I'm going to move on to GitHub. This is quite the RStudio platform is quite intuitive. So I'll just let you kind of explore that, and there's a lot of good online resources for that. And thank you to whoever posted the link for the RStudio Cloud. Okay, so a few features of RStudio that you might not have explored if you use it is one of my favorite ones is Find in Files. So you can click that and search over all your files. I actually will sometimes go into RStudio when I need to search for other things, because this feature is just so handy. And you can, it'll show the list of what it finds, and you can click that, and then it'll open up that file for you. It saves so much time. Then there's a lot of really handy features about coding. So like commenting and uncommenting code, you can just really quickly do that. And then re-indenting your lines to do that. That's really handy. Then one last thing, I should tell you one last thing about RStudio that you might not have know about, and that is the styler package. So the styler package is, okay, so there's kind of styles when you code, sort of keeping things uniform, making your code look all clean, and it's really hard to remember those, especially if you come from like a C background, a Fortran background, kind of anything else. You probably are used to using equal signs. So I'm just going to do an equal sign there. An R doesn't, the standard form for coding doesn't use equal signs, it uses these arrows. You might also have things where you get a little, like, wonky with your spacing, and you know, as a programmer, you really ought to use a standard style, but it's just such a hassle to remember. And if you use the styler package, what happens is that it'll automatically put these add-ins in. You've probably never seen this before unless you knew about it. And if you click these add-ins, then I'm on my Windows machine. I can't show you the example. On my Mac, I have the styler installed. I don't have it on my Windows machine. But what you would see is an entry here for styler, and you can just click that and style either the file or the selection. Saves a ton of work. And there's also a variety of other really helpful add-ins like spelling, which is great. You can check all the spelling in your work. So so if you install that package, the styler package, you're going to see the add-in. If you install things like the spelling, you can see that. Just go and search online for add-ins, and you'll find a lot of really handy things that can save you a lot of time. Okay, so I am now going to leave that, so the kind of whirlwind introduction there, and I encourage you to go through some of the material that I posted here, at least skim it. Even if you're a seasoned programmer, you're going to learn something new by skimming through these links. And these are from the Hadley Data Science. I think they're mostly the Data Science or R Workflow online books. It's all free. And just skim that, you'll learn some good material. Also, I would definitely look at this thing for projects and think about how to organize your projects. Using a standard organization within your projects will definitely help you in the long run, and will super help you if you end up developing R packages later. And there's a lot of good reasons to develop R packages just for yourself. And you'll see examples of that in a few weeks. Okay, so let's jump into Git and GitLab. So I'm going to go more into Git and GitHub next week also. My goal today is to show you how to get started in a sort of not painful way. get you connected with it and get your code connected with it. So basics. Let's first talk about kind of the lingo here. So repository, often called a repo, that's your code and the record of your code. So that, when I was talking about like your RStudio projects, that you can kind of think about that's your project, but it's also got all this history of what you've done. And once you have that history, the cool thing about that is you could go back in time. Like if you don't like a change you made, you can go back, and you can also just see what you've done. There's a lot more you can do, but those are like the basics. Okay, actions, the three common words you're going to hear are commit, push, and pull. Commit is making a note about what change you made. That's it. It's just making a little note about that. So you're putting an entry in the history. Okay? You haven't connected it up with anything. You've just made a little note in your history about what you've done. Pushing is pushing those changes up to, say, GitHub. So I'm going to use an example where we've got a local repository. That's what's on, say, my computer, your computer, and then we're going to be connected to a remote repository on GitHub. And pushing would be pushing the changes up to GitHub. And pulling would be pulling the changes down from GitHub. You don't necessarily have to be connected with a remote repository. You can also just use it locally, and then you would just be committing your changes just so you have a record of what you've been doing. Git is the program that's keeping track of those changes and kind of it's doing the grunt work in the background. You can interact with Git on the command line, don't do that when you're beginning. You will get yourself into a lot of knots. Even people who use Git all the time typically use a Git graphical user interface. It's more powerful. You don't mess up your repositories. You work a lot faster using an interface. The interface I'm going to show today is Github Desktop. As I mentioned, you can also interact with Git through RStudio. I'm welcome to talk about that at the end. In the archive up here, you'll also see my material, including video from last year, where I talked about using Git from RStudio. And I did that because I thought, it's going to be easier, one less thing for people to install. But the authentication aspects, they're just kind of a hassle, and also the graphical user interface is not as nice. I don't use Git through RStudio. I use it through Github Desktop because it just works better, and you're going to see an example of that. Probably there are many other graphical user interfaces. I've given you a link here to other ones, and I would probably switch to kind of a more full-featured one, except for two reasons. One, Github Desktop just does what I need, and I don't feel like dealing with any authentication issues. And because GitHub develops Github Desktop, they deal with all the authentication stuff that I don't want to have to, like I don't want to be doing SSH keys and stuff. I know how to do it, it's just a hassle. I just don't feel like it. So that's one thing. Also, just Github Desktop is really pretty simple, and it's just easy to use. Okay, so I strongly suggest, start that at least as your first graphical interface, and you may just, like me, end up using that. So let's see what a workflow with GitHub looks like. So we have an RStudio project. We're going to make some changes. We're working along, entering our data, making our code. And then when we're ready, and that just kind of depends on your style, you're going to commit your changes. I commit all the time. Like whenever I make a change, like, I'm going through and I'm replacing something, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll just commit that now. So I commit a lot. Other people commit maybe at the end of the day or end of their work session. And the reason I commit a lot is that if I want to go back in time, I can only go back to my last commit. So if I only do it at the end of the day, then if I needed to go back, I'd kind of lose a whole day of work. But it's really up to you how you do that. Okay, so you're going to be working, and then you're going to commit, and then you keep working, and then you commit. So you're doing that, and that's just doing that locally on your own computer. And then, when you're ready, you would push up to your GitHub repository. So, and then you go back working, do some more commits, and then when you're ready, you push. You can push whenever you want, just kind of up to you. And then, if you're within a team, so if there are other people who might be pushing to that GitHub repository, you would need to pull. And so you would pull it into your local repository, and then you would, on your side in RStudio, you're going to immediately see those changes. So when you pull, it's kind of pulling two places. It looks to you as if it showed up here, but what's happening in the background is it kind of pulled here, and you see it there. However, when you start off, what I would suggest is work by yourself. Don't work in a team until you get kind of used to GitHub, working with Git. That way you're not going to get into any conflicts with one person's changes overlapping the other. So start simple and start with the dark blue workflow. Work locally, commit, push. Work locally, commit, push. Simple workflow. Start there. And what that means also is that you're going to see is you could make changes on GitHub. I'm going to demonstrate that later. You could, and then you would need to pull those in to get those locally. And my experience working with people is if they get into that workflow where they make changes on GitHub, they often forget to do the pull, and then, so they've forgotten to do the pull, and then they start working here, and then they try to push things up, and GitHub says, you can't do that. There, you've got a merge conflict. And merge conflicts cause you a lot of headaches. So next week, I'm going to talk with you about how to easily deal with merge conflicts and just show you what it is. And so it kind of demystifies it. Once you see really how to do it, you'll see it's not hard. It's just a hassle. So when you start off, just try to avoid that by using the dark blue workflow. Go one way and just you. Okay, so let's get started. So if you have RStudio and Github Desktop installed on your machine, you're going to be able to follow along right away. The rest of you, you can watch how it's done, and then hopefully you can sort of get started yourself. What I'm planning to do for the RStudio Cloud is to make a little video to show you how to do this on RStudio Cloud. I'm not going to cover it today because there's a few different steps. I think it'll be better if I just write that up and give you a little video for that. And then for doing it through Git through RStudio, I will post the link to my 2020 material, or you can just find that right here in the archive. Okay, so let's give this a try. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a repo on GitHub, and we're going to pull that in to RStudio. So this is my key kind of pro tip for linking up your RStudio with GitHub in the beginning. And that is when you first set things up, create it on GitHub and pull it into RStudio. GitHub first, pull in. Don't try to create locally and then publish and push it up. Not in the beginning. And even today, even though I have like 50 repositories, I still make it on GitHub and then pull it in, and then that links it up easily for me without a lot of headaches. For those who came in later, yes, this is being recorded, and I will post the video. Okay, so let me go to, let's go to GitHub here. Just go here, GitHub. Organizations, you can see I have tons of organizations. We're going to go here. Okay, so we want to create a new repository. It's going to be our template. So let's go new. Okay, so I did that kind of quickly here. So I can click new here. You can also do this, the plus sign up there. It's going to do the same thing. The plus sign gives you also import, which we're going to talk about next week. So this one, we're just going to do a new here. Okay. There we go. Okay. So you know, just ignore that. Let's give it a name. I'm going to make it public. So this is a key thing here. We're going to add a README. We need a file here so that we can pull it into RStudio. Okay, sorry, just looking at something here. Yep. Okay. And add, git, ignore, sure. Yeah, I typically do that. At least that gets me started. What this does is it's telling it files to ignore when you're pushing up, and you will want this. Okay. Ignore. I usually ignore license. So that's it. So this is my normal workflow. Those are the things that I select. The key thing is remember to click that add README bit. If you don't do that, you create a hassle for yourself later. So I create it. Okay, so now I have created this repository that I can add things to on GitHub. And now what I do is I'm going to copy that URL. And now I'm going to click and go to RStudio. Okay. I'm clicking up in the corner, new project. Password. So sorry about this. Okay, try that again. I need to be more patient. New? Okay, good. So now you click version control, click Git, because we're using GitHub, and now I paste in that URL. There it is. It's going to give me a name. That's fine. It's going to ask me where to save it. You can kind of pick anywhere you want to save it. I personally have a folder in my documents with all my GitHub repositories. So that's where I will save things to keep things tidy. The one thing I will say is if you use a backup system like iCloud or Dropbox or something where you're syncing across multiple computers, do not put your GitHub repositories there. You will create a nightmare for yourself. So you need to make sure it's outside of anything like iCloud or Dropbox if you happen to use that. I know that like in NoO we can't use Dropbox, but some people use that personally, so you should know not to put it there. So I just have mine within my documents folder. So let's not see. So someone said their desktop RStudio does not see GitHub. You do not need to see GitHub. All it will say is new project using version control. And then when you do that, it will give you the option to select Git. And that's where you are pasting in this repository URL. If you go to the material for the lab, I put that in the chat. You can see the exact instructions. Okay, so reiterate that workflow. You create it on GitHub. You copy the URL of your new repository. You do create project. Here, up here, new project, click that. Okay, taking too long. Okay, my Windows machine is being very slow. But when you select that new project, then should show the version control, and that's where you paste in that URL. Yeah, right here. So that workflow is going to connect those two for you. Okay, so cancel. Project name does not need to match the repository name, but I would make them match because otherwise you'll get yourself confused. Okay. So now, I've got this GitHub repository here. It really doesn't have anything. The only thing it has is the README that was created. But now I can start adding things to this. And now let me show you how you're going to link this up with a GitHub Desktop. And I realize it feels like this is adding an extra step. It feels like, oh, hey, Eli, just click on Git up here. But as I said, GitHub Desktop actually will make your life a lot easier, and a lot of people will use a GUI separate from RStudio. So now that we pulled in that repository, but GitHub Desktop doesn't know about it. So the step that we need to do now is to tell GitHub Desktop about it. So we do File, Add Local Repository. No, there's no issues with RStudio or GitHub working on 32-bit versus 64. And all we have to do is navigate to wherever that repository is. I told you I put mine always in document under GitHub, and now you can perhaps see why I always put them in the same place. If I had it scattered all over my computer, I would just suffer trying to find the new repository that I just pulled in. So I have them all in the same folder, and there it is, week 1, select folder, add repository. All right, so now, be there, are you there? There we go. All right, so there it is. Okay, so now, so those are 3 steps. I pulled it in, and then I told GitHub Desktop about it. So now, let's see the workflow about how we commit changes to our repository and push them back up to GitHub. Now we have them all linked up, and it's quite simple here. So I have just switched back over to RStudio, and you can see where I am. I know where I am because I'm in week 1. I can see it right up there. And let's add a change to this README file. It's just our info about it. I clicked on that. It opened up in the file here, so this is week 1. So I say this is a demo repository. Save that. I'm going to add a script file. Let's say, make a plot. Sorry, I did that really fast. So I clicked the just the save button that was up there. I'm going to call it test.r. Okay. Now you see the test.r. So now I've made 2 changes, and now I'm going to hop over to GitHub Desktop and commit those changes. So now you can see the changes that I've made here, and I can click on them. In this simple example, it may seem like, okay, how is this so useful? But you will see, if you're doing a lot of changes, you're doing a lot of work throughout the day, it is so useful to be able to click, say, on the README, and you've forgotten, man, what was I doing 3 hours ago that I made a change? You look, oh, right, okay. Oh, yeah, that's what I was doing. And then you look here, and you're like, okay, great. Okay, that's what I was doing. So now I need to commit my changes. And let's say I've been working a few hours, and I made a bunch of different things, different changes. So I don't have to click all of them together. I can kind of group changes that should be grouped together. So let's say I was editing all the files that were the data for a particular population. I've gotten some new data in, and maybe I just click on all the data and then make some notes about what was going on with that data change, for example. In this case, I'm going to do a change for the README, and you have to tell a little note. It just says, it gives you a default here, update README. It's not all that useful. You could use that, but I add more descriptive things. In this case, it's a minor change, so just add a description. What you put into the notes here, so that's like the title. You can also add more things here. What you add is personal preference, but what I will say is that you will be able to search through these later. And in a work, if you're doing this for a real project, you want to think about whether you will need to search back in your future self will need to search. So sometimes my comments are really short, like minor, like it is minor. Other times I'm putting in something longer because I think I may have to go back and search. Okay, so, and then you commit, so that's it. And then test.r, just make a plot. And this seems like it's not, these comments I'm making here are not that useful. That's just a demo. In real life, you'd be putting something more descriptive. I'm not going to push my R proj up there. You can if you were working alone. If you're working on a team, you don't want to be sharing your RStudio project files. That R proj is specific to RStudio. So it's a little annoying that the default GitHub git ignore does not include R proj. So you always have to add it. So this, if you click git ignore, these are all the things it's not pushing up to GitHub. And you can see, like, it's not getting your history. It's, you know, and it has this thing for RStudio files. And I don't know why it doesn't include the RProj file. But if you do star RProj, save that. Well, let's go back. Going back to RStudio Desktop. You can see the RProj has disappeared because we told it ignore those, and it appeared right here. So now I'm just going to say, all right. So now we can look through the history. We can see everything that we've done, and then we can push to GitHub. Someone asked, can I repeat why you don't want to push the RProj? If you are the only person interacting with this repository, that's fine. You could push it. But say you're working on a team, that person may have their RStudio project set up a little bit differently than you, and that RProj has some info about that. Or perhaps they don't interact with R using RStudio, right? Nothing about your files are really specific to RStudio. It's all R code. And so they wouldn't need that RStudio file. So that's why I don't normally push it up. Also, I may have things set up differently on my Mac versus my Windows machine. I don't need those. I would like to have different RStudio RProj files on my different machines. So that's why I'm not pushing it up. Nothing really bad is going to happen if you do push it. Okay. All right. So now let's go back over to here. And we are going to refresh this. And now you can see our files are here. So you can see it's really quite simple to do. Take it, copy the URL, create the project, and then in your day-to-day work, all you're doing is you're making your changes, then bopping over to GitHub Desktop and selecting your changes, entering those, and then pushing those up. So it doesn't take a lot of time, and if using this workflow, you don't mess things up. So there's a question about merge conflicts. Yeah, there could be possibly a merge conflict, possibly, yeah. Next week, that brings up the topic of merge conflicts. But as I said, I'm going to talk about that next week. And I'll go into a few more details about kind of typical things that you want to do with, like, copying repositories and how to go about that. So last thing, what I want to show today is to show you a more realistic example of a repository where I have a lot of changes. And I'm going to also demonstrate why I use, personally, GitHub Desktop. So as I said, I maintain many repositories. So these are all the repositories I have at the moment. You can see I have multiple organizations. I need to be able to jump between them. So for me, this platform allows me to do that much better than RStudio Git does. In fact, the RStudio Git doesn't allow me to do this. It has little icons telling me that, hey, so like this arrow tells me that there's a change on GitHub that's not on my local computer, so I know I need to pull it in. Another nice thing is it has this nice big platform, and when I'm working on a real project, so here's Sardine paper. So this is a paper that I was developing over a number of years. And I can very easily go through the whole history of this paper, starting, there we go, yeah, 2017. And I can go back and I can look at, okay, that was the first commit for this paper. This was the first draft. And then I can go through and I can see everything that was done. This example with a paper, you can imagine too, like in a report that you're writing, how this really increases your transparency, creates a nice record, everything that was done and why it was done. Another nice feature, and I'll talk about this next week, are these sort of the gray things here. And these are periods where I used GitHub to create a quote-unquote release. So I packaged up the status of this paper at particular times. So, for example, these are final updates before trips. Yeah, so this is like, the update the first time I submitted it to the journal. So I have like a release. It's all bundled together. I know exactly what it was like when I submitted it. So when I continue to work on it, if I needed to go back to the state that it was at when I submitted it, I could do that. Okay. So, and the other nice thing here is like it shows me here, that I can pull that in right there. Okay, okay, I'm just about to the end here. So I do want to show you, though, that yes, you could do this with in GitHub Studio. If you have things all linked up, go to the material from 2020, gives you all the instructions to how to link up RStudio and Git, and has a big troubleshooting section on there, too. Once you get them all linked together, what you can do is you will see here, and you'll see your changes here. So I can make a change. And now I see this in this Git tab, and I could do that here. I could click that. I could click commit. A window will open up. I can then add the commit message here. Okay. And commit that here. Then it opens up all these extra windows. Now I have to go about and closing open windows as it is opened up. Okay. So that may, yes, the commit message is a notation, and you'll be able to search that commit message later. So, yes, some people, find that works better working with Git with RStudio, but like I said, authentication hassles and setting it up might be worth it to you. You can see I do have mine set up so I can use it. Sometimes I do. But the interface is clunky. You're opening up all these extra windows. This is just quite a bit cleaner. Oh, right. Okay, we are at 11. Okay, so that is it for the material today. And next week, sorry, WebEx keeps blocking my material. Next week, what I'm going to be going into is, okay, how do we do some more things that we need to do? Like, what if I need to copy somebody else's repo? How should I do that? That's another area where you can suffer a lot. And I'm going to show you how not to suffer when you copy other people's repos. I'm also going to show you, somebody mentioned, well, what about if you want to make changes on GitHub? I'm going to show you how to do that. And then we'll talk about some really key things you want to use, like issues and releases. Those are the two things I would definitely say to learn. Okay, that's the end of the material. I'm now going to stop chatting, and I'm going to read the chats or unmute yourself and just ask questions. I'm going to be on for another half hour just to answer your questions for today's material. I will put the link up to the recording. Should have it by Tuesday since Monday is a holiday.